I've got 5:31, and this is a committee of whole meeting of the school board of the West Bend Joint School District Number 1. We do recognize a quorum tonight. Nancy Justman just texted and said she'll be here in 2 minutes. Deb, can you confirm this meeting was properly posted?
Yes, it was.
Why don't we stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, hopefully the board has had a chance to look over our agenda for tonight. We typically don't like to have action items on the committee of a whole agenda, but we do have a resignation and ratification of a contract, so we went ahead and put that on tonight through consent. And with that, I will move to approve our consent agenda.
Second.
And again, our consent agenda is the minutes of the September 9th regular board meeting, ratification of contract, and resignation. Any questions? Nancy, we just made a motion on our consent agenda.
Had to park in the back 40. Wow.
Yeah. I'm assuming everyone's not here tonight for our consent agenda, but we're going to take care of that real quick. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. And our consent agenda is approved. We've got a football game at 7:15 tonight, a big football game. I went ahead and wore my jersey, so did Kurt. In Green Bay, they have their annual budget hearing. It was supposed to be tonight, and they moved that to tomorrow night. So we'll get through our agenda tonight. We have a bunch of guests with us tonight, and I'm going to introduce Mayor Craig Sedonico here in a minute. But this is a private task force that Craig came to Don and I kind of right after our failed referendum in April, and kind of came up with this idea of, can we put together some residents and business owners in the community to look at the buildings and talk about, the needs of our facilities, and down the road present to the board. And if you remember back in May or June, whenever that was, the sponsors of this, Kevin Steiner and Tim Schmidt, came and kind of presented that to us, and so here we are. And this was an independent private task force. It was not funded by the district. We didn't ask them to do this. This was their idea. And so we've come to the point where they've asked to come and present their findings. And I'll introduce Mayor Craig Sedonico, and I'll let you introduce the task force. Thanks for being here tonight.
Appreciate it, Joel. I don't know how close you've got to be to the mic. We'll pass it around as needed, but thank you. I'm proud to be here representing the West Bend School District Private Task Force. It's a long name, but we believe it describes us well. You should all have a hard copy of the PowerPoint. I gave Don a jump drive. We've got a few more here. For some reason, anybody would like a digital version of the PowerPoint. We can
Craig,
make that
I
available.
hate to interrupt, but once you hand this to the board, then this does become a public document. Are you okay with that?
We are okay with that.
Okay,
It's been,
thanks.
time flies and you're having fun, and we're happy to be here making this document public. So please distribute it as you see fit. PowerPoint will run through. A couple of different folks will speak tonight. We're really going to describe some of the background of the work that we've done, what our findings are, what some of the results are, and then conclude. I'd like to start off with just a couple of thank yous as an introduction. Most importantly, or first of all, thanks to our group of volunteers. We assembled a pretty unique group. I knew most of these individuals before the task force was formed, but not all of them. I didn't have to twist any arms or buy any lunches when presenting the thoughts. 100% of these folks were all in, and they're up at the table here and sitting right behind me. We all volunteered down to a person because we value high-quality education in West Bend. We, of course, focused on facilities and the important role that facilities play in education. We fully understand that education is not 100% about buildings, but they certainly do play a role, and that was our focus. Without going into introductions one by one, again, our team is here, and we come from a very varied background that includes professionals in IT and education, in construction, personnel and facilities management, architecture, as well as an incredible amount of time and volunteerism on dozens of boards throughout the community and the region, including education boards. It's been a fun, qualified group that truly does care about education. Thanks also to Delta Defense and West Bend Mutual. Joel mentioned both Kevin and Tim were here several months ago. You mentioned it, Joel, and it's important for the citizens to understand that this is a 100% privately funded and organized group. Both Kevin and Tim were immediately in, and I think it's fair to say that they're proud as individuals and as leaders of their organizations to have helped in this mission. And finally, thanks to Don and Dave Ross and district staff. We were rapid firing some information requests out to these guys back in middle and late summer, and the answers were sent in a timely manner and they were complete, so thanks to that full team. We're here not only on the heels of a failed referendum attempt this last April, but because our task force recognizes that there has been a multi-year challenge to communicate and align the district goals with public opinion. What the district understands versus what the public does. It's been challenging to communicate the condition of the schools, the role facilities play in education, with the expectations of the constituency, and getting well-rounded cohesive support for any plan from the voters. We feel our task force is important because it offers a completely independent opinion and a critical analysis of options, along with our findings on how to strategically plan and maintain our school district facilities going into the future. While it's likely some of our task force members voted in favor of the referendum and others did not, we all understand that doing nothing with the facilities is not a realistic option, nor is it prudent physical planning for any organization, including our school district. Some of the fundamentals that we worked under, and we ask you and the public to please keep in mind that we fully recognize we are not elected to represent the constituents. We appreciate your role, your abilities, your responsibilities to implement any plan that you decide is best for the citizens. You've got a tough job. Our work may or may not make that job easier. You'll find out in a few minutes. But at a minimum, what we have found and what we think will be clear, we understand that it's up to you to disseminate that information and decide how to move forward. We as a group worked hard to avoid bringing any politics or public opinion or individual feelings into our findings. We're black and white facilities guys, and we looked at data. We looked at past and present financial numbers, future projections, enrollment information, geography, busing, sustainability, and a whole host of other data points. We're not a public relations organization looking to sway opinion one way or another. As Joel mentioned, we are not an arm of the board of the district. You didn't ask us to be here. We asked for your permission. I think it's important for the public to know that regardless of what you hear today, that this is our work, not the board's. We ask you not to beat up the board if you hear something that you may not like. This is our work. You can beat up Mr. Strike. On just one quick tangent, we're going to dig into some information that includes enrollment data. For the most part, that was enrollment data prior to September of 19. We understand that there's some up-to-date information available. We implemented some of that in here, but I think the newest data makes our findings even more relevant. We challenged ourselves, knowing that this was a hot topic, we challenged ourselves to do a few things. Number one, to ask questions that have never been publicly asked before of the school district. We challenged each other to openly ask tough questions, and we did. We felt and still feel that it's critical to take a long-term, sustainable approach to operating facilities. Just like in any business, this may cause some short-term resistance due to possible changes, but we feel over the mid and long terms, our findings that you'll hear about are the best choices available. We don't believe that there can be business as usual in public education, and that's not just here. All around us, we're seeing districts that are closing and consolidating. Funding formulas don't appear to be changing anytime soon. Enrollment projections in many areas for a variety of reasons are declining, and the cost to build and maintain facilities is increasing. So a new approach with new solutions is required to overcome new obstacles. And finally, industry best practices for modern educational assets were used in our findings. We do not include buying additional duct tape for Dave and his team. Zimmerman really helped us keep on track and stay on track as to what new modern facilities should be. Some background to our work. Number one, we toured some schools. You guys asked early on, I think at the first meeting, if we would tackle Decorah and Fair Park also. We resisted. until after we toured Jackson and the high schools. We quickly found that really in order to get a full understanding of the scope of the conditions at our most challenged schools, and I say challenged from a facility standpoint, we really needed to add decor and fair park into the mix, and we did. We really got into the nooks and crannies. We discussed cosmetic items, mechanical systems, room sizes and gyms and lunchrooms and roofing and IT and windows and masonry and asphalt and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we feel as though we've got a very good understanding of the current condition of those schools. We requested a bunch of information that I touched on earlier, current and past maintenance budgets to see how we care for facilities. Do we have enough capital to maintain what we have? Not to mention to maintain anything that's new. We looked at future anticipated capital needs at all the facilities, and that information was derived from facts and figures and past work that the district had done. So that was the district's own information. We looked at operational costs down to gas and electric and maintaining the facilities. We took a look at the district's 25-year plan that was developed some years ago. The assumptions made then are really what's driving decisions today, and I'll touch on that a little bit further as we go along. Then we looked at the referendum question. What facilities did the referendum really address? What was clear in that referendum and what may not have been as clear? To get you inside of our meetings, because we come from a variety of backgrounds, to say the least, we had some very pointed discussions and lively debates. We worked hard to limit tangents. We really tried to stay on focus, although athletic participation and some district marketing, and of course even 1 versus 2 high schools crept into our discussion once in a while, but we dialed ourselves back to facilities. And ultimately, and maybe most importantly, we felt early on, and we still feel the same way today, that it is critical for our task force to speak with one voice. If we couldn't collaborate and agree on what message to send to you, how could we expect you or the district residents to speak with one voice? So please know that none of us thinks our document and our findings are 100% perfect. We all would like to see some tweaks here and there, but this document is something that we all 100% support and will do so privately and publicly going forward. On to our actual findings categories. We've got 4 of those categories. Some general findings that I'll present. High school priorities will be tackled by Owen. Randy Stark will talk about our elementary and facilities deployment. Ed Duquesne will talk operational considerations, and we've got some gentlemen from Zimmerman Architectural Studios here to answer any questions or chime in regarding the facilities themselves. So in general, we found a need to utilize what we're calling a rolling 25-year facilities and maintenance plan that's constantly updated internally with the newest information and data available. The 25-year plan can't be something that's stagnant, put on a shelf, collecting dust. We believe that current decisions are being made using some past information that was very likely accurate when it was developed, and Randy sat on the committee that put that 25-year plan together a decade ago, and he's pretty proud of the work, but also recognizes that it's a decade or so old. We think it'd be very useful for administration to publicly present that 25-year plan, at least on an annual basis at the board level. And then we suggest a 5-year public committee that works at putting updates into that 25-year plan. We think it's critical that that plan be committed to, not only communicated, but committed to. As boards and administrations change and evolve over time, we think it's critical that that overall path is followed. And that may mean, and likely will mean, that tough annual decisions and creative solutions are necessary to be communicated on an annual basis to realign what new data there may be, realign changes in funding. But we think that having tough decisions to nudge your way back on track on an annual basis is better than that discussion happening every decade or so. Secondly, we found that as a district, that we've got multiple campuses at a wide geographic location. That makes maintaining and supervising and operating campuses pretty difficult. This includes the district offices, the maintenance facilities, alternative education. Unlike, I would say some, I don't know if it's many, but unlike quite a few districts that will have an elementary school and district offices and maybe a middle school combined. We're pretty geographically spread out, and it makes operating the district likely a little more expensive and probably likely a little bit more challenging. Internal and external messaging. We found that meaningful communication with the public, specifically with relation to facilities, could be better. We see more announcements, student achievement, and communication from surrounding districts than we probably do in West Bend. We think there's an opportunity for the district to increase overall communication. We feel that that increased communication is critical to engaging citizens, to avoid them feeling that the district itself is not open or transparent. We believe it is. We just think you can communicate it. Especially with regard to facilities, we found that we feel that erring on the side of too much communication is probably better than erring on the side of too little. Number 4 is that we have found that facilities either are or are about to affect education, and probably not in a positive way. And we'd like to be clear again, I touched on it earlier, that we fully recognize that buildings don't educate kids. But modern, technologically savvy, energy efficient, well-maintained assets certainly are an expectation that we have for the district, and it certainly does positively, those attributes would certainly positively affect education. The district infrastructure belongs to the constituents, and it should be just that. It should be an asset. In many cases, our buildings are currently liabilities. High-quality, well-maintained schools not only have a positive impact on education, but also on the marketing of the city to new residents, employers, and that also helps trigger quality of life improvements. So simply put, our facilities demand and need investment. Money is the solution to the problem. More money may not be, and we'll get into that a little bit. We feel that we'll show over the midterm facilities and operational efficiencies, along with cost avoidance, can likely pay for improvements that can happen today. And finally, most obvious to our group is that the capital maintenance budget is inadequate. We've got about 1.4 million square feet of buildings. We've got about $1.5 million in maintenance budget. We think that's likely underfunded by a multiple of 2 or 3, depending on how much square footage ultimately the district arrives at. We really don't think that we can consider new investment in new facilities without solving the problem of how do we maintain what we already own. We think it's probably inappropriate to make new investment into facilities unless we can maintain what we currently have, and it's basic business and basic family management. And we don't add employees at our businesses if we can't pay for the ones that we have. And as much as we want to, and as much as we love them, we don't buy our kids new toys if they're not taking care of the ones that they already have also. Building new facilities with the sole rationale of avoiding maintenance feels good in the short term, but it's really quickly a losing equation. We think the answer is an increased maintenance budget married to a reduction in overall square footage at the district. Those are the general findings. I will hand the microphone over. We're going to Owen, right? Owen, to talk about some high school priorities.
All right, well, thank you very much for the time this evening, and I'll echo what Craig said. Thank you very much to Don and Dave and the staff of the West Bend School District for being so responsive and thorough in your responses when we asked a lot of questions. And we did ask a lot of questions. To reiterate, again, what Craig said, we did a lot of work as we went into the high schools, and then as Randy talks about the elementary schools. But in the high schools, we did tour it, we did speak with staff, we looked at reports, we looked at enrollment forecasts, we collaborated with local vendors and some of the local school districts around for best practices. Zimmerman certainly was instrumental in helping make sure that as we evaluated it, that our benchmark was modern facilities that are equipped to educate the kids of tomorrow. So a lot of work went into it. What we found is a number of findings with the schools where there are certainly legitimate facilities needs at the high schools that needs to be addressed. We did prioritize those into 5 different buckets, starting with the highest priority and working our way down. Again, those priorities are a matter of a subjective evaluation of it and certainly open to discussion. But as we looked at it, we thought it was a priority that made sense as we move forward. Moving to the first priority, priority A of safety. The main portion with this is just with modern school design, we need to create a single entrance that in and out of the high schools. This was part of the referendum question about how to create that modern design and make sure we have it there. It's not really applicable to the beginning and the end of the school day when all of the doors are open and kids are flooding in and out. But certainly during the school day, having a single entrance that's monitored with a person trap, where you can make sure we have background checks and ID checks and people are monitored going in and out of the building is important and necessary. As we looked at that, the costs of it is, again, with Zimmerman fed a lot of this information to us. We think that to create a single entrance in the front of the high school with a controlled entrance with modern security, with cameras and all the stuff you need for it is about $1.75 million, an additional $600,000 for the security measures in place. The second priority, priority B, is around the efficiency and making the best of the functional assets that are already in the schools. Primarily something that jumped out here was the infrastructure with the lighting and the HVAC systems of the high schools. The HVAC has had some upgrades, it still needs some work. The lighting is several generations older than modern facilities and horribly inefficient as far as their electric usage. I think, Kurt, this is something you hit on when you were running for office. So it's recognizing that, modernizing the HVAC and LED, there's a cost associated with that up front, but the ROI, or the return on investment, is fairly rapid in bringing that back. The costs associated put here are not including any incentives or grants that are often available through various government bodies or private enterprises to offset some of the upfront cost as we build an ongoing savings. The second piece of that is the locker rooms and shower rooms. So if you look down in the locker and showers, as we all know, they are out of date and they are non-functional in a lot of places. We did one of the boys' shower rooms, for instance, had 24 shower heads, of which only 2 were functional. We understand that a student took it upon himself to get a third one working. So we've increased shower capacity by 50% in that shower room. However, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Some of it is modernizing the facility itself. Some of it is just repairing what's there and putting some effort into making sure that it's working properly. So that we see that as the second highest priority. The third priority is modernization of the existing footprint. Some of this work, as I understand, is already underway, and some of it took place over the summer, so some of these costs may be a little out of date. However, there's a lot of unused and underutilized space in the libraries and study halls. Taking those spaces, collapsing the 2 libraries into a single facility that better serves the students, opens up a lot of floor plan to make classroom space and other office space and other, whatever you want to use it for, space available for the high schools. So we think there's a lot of room there. And then also just general classroom upgrades and additions. Some of the classrooms are in fine shape, some of them could use some work, just ceiling tiles, lighting, various things that they need to make sure they are functional and working. The costs here are essentially going through the whole high school and looking at and working on all the classrooms and bringing them up to a modern standard. The fifth finding, no wait, what am I on? I'm on fourth finding. The fourth finding is where we see as an option for a fairly significant upgrade in conjunction with some of the other things we're doing. So as you consider putting in a single entrance at the front and consolidating the offices around it, there's a courtyard up there in the center of the high school that used to be, back in the day, is where the kids went to smoke. I understand that is discouraged nowadays. So right now it's completely underutilized, it's empty space. For relatively low cost. You can put a roof over that and create a really attractive commons area for students and visitors to collaborate as they enter the building, gives them a place to be. It's still a controlled entrance coming in and out, but it also creates a fantastic first impression for visitors to the campus as they enter the high schools. Without having to upgrade the entire building, that first impression could be a modern, well-lit common space where people can come in and out of the facility and get a great first impression of our high school facility. So again, this is something that is, I would not call this a need, it is a want, but I think a very attractive option in conjunction with other options that could be considered. The fifth finding is around and this was part of the referendum space as well, has to do with the trades facilities down in the auto and welding and all of that. As we went through it, the equipment in there its placement is suboptimal, put it that way. It's not arranged in a very, very usable format. It needs some work. I think we all know that. In evaluating this and with conversations with local, MPTC and other local, or WPTC, and other local government and private bodies, we think there's a great option here to use private money and also collaboration with other governmental bodies to upgrade this facility with zero cost to the district. With that, we think, and I'll give you an example for the welding. Right now, the welding for the tech school is down in Jackson. They're considering bringing it, or they are working on bringing it back to the main campus. That is a facility that's only generally used in the evenings and weekends because it's targeted at adults, meaning there are hours during the day where it's unused and open for use by the district. I understand from Don that there's already some conversations around perhaps some collaboration with that, and we think there's a lot of opportunity there to provide a significant upgrade to this facility at zero incremental cost to the district. So in total, if you sum up all the options we look, I'm going to emphasize a couple things. One, that these costs were estimated by Zimmerman and with collaboration with other local vendors. They're subject to, we did estimate those on the high side. So you'll see throughout the presentations that we estimated costs on the high side and savings on the low side, taking a conservative approach to the entire calculation. Also that you see at the bottom that we consider a 20% plus or minus on these numbers for what actual numbers may be. And some of these items, as I mentioned, have already been in process in the normal operational flow of the district, so may be taken off the list as we move forward. And with that, I will turn it over to Randy.
All right, thanks, Owen. Everybody hear me all right? All right. So I got tasked with the opportunity to lead the subcommittee effort into elementary schools. And in keeping pace with Craig and Owen, I want to thank Dave Ross. Dave did a fantastic job of getting us the information we needed. I was here on the interview committee when Dave was brought into the district. And on a positive side, I remember that time 10 years ago, or even more now, we were in much worse shape. We've actually done some really good things since then till now. We've passed some referendums. We fixed up Badger. We did some great work at Silverbrook. We got Barton off of our books. So all is not lost here. We've done some good things, and we got some opportunities ahead of us, and I'll share some of the thoughts that came out of that. When we took a look at this, I'll reiterate what Craig said at the beginning. We looked at this really objectively. We are not here concerned with the soft part of this. We looked at this purely through a business lens, and we talked about this just the way we would in our conference rooms or our board rooms or in front of the whiteboards in our own businesses with our own teams. And we tried to look at what do we need to do and what's the most optimum cost-effective way to do it. And that's the type of findings that you're going to get out of this group this evening. So when we do that, at least in our environment, what I encourage is, first thing we have to do is define the problem. What exactly are we trying to solve for? And then we start to list out what the options are. And we start to debate what the pros and cons of each option are. So when we start to talk about what do we have in front of us with respect to elementary schools and what do they need to do for us, we want to talk about the age, we want to talk about the square footage, the capacity, the condition, how well are they suited to do the job of educating elementary kids in today's environment. When we did that, we started to look at all the elementary schools, and the discussion drifted into discussions about Rolf's and the maintenance building and this district office. And we talked about the idea that Dave shared with us, that his estimated 10-year spend in a perfect world to meet all of the capital improvement needs that are needed for that list of facilities is about $22.5 million. And we know that we are not at all prepared to make that investment. So we're sitting on an allocation right now of about $1.5 million annually, and which, if you do the math, you can see that every year we're losing ground if we're trying to maintain at least a status quo condition of facilities. When we looked at how well are the facilities used and what are their capacities, we are sitting at about 79% usage of our elementary schools in an environment where we're expecting that number to get lower with declining enrollments. 81% of our elementary square footage is over 40 years old. 72% is over 50 years old. So we talk about how old, in aggregate, is all of the buildings in our inventory. We have to think about at what point do we start to take some of the older inventory offline and decommission it and try to replace it. So that is how we defined what we have to do. And we talked about, well, what are the options? Well, anytime you solve a problem, we always talk about one of the options is you could do absolutely nothing. And sometimes that's the right answer. Sometimes the right answer is just let things just the way they are. So we list under our options. Option one is do nothing. And it comes with some advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages is we certainly don't have to try to come up with referendum dollars to do new construction if we're going to do nothing. But it comes with some pretty substantial disadvantages. No cost options always don't necessarily have no cost, especially when you have buildings that continually deteriorate. $1.5 million a year, as we discussed, is leaving a substantial gap in what we really need to maintain our current facilities in their current form. Option number two, as we sat and brainstormed, was, well, we could retain all these buildings, and we could figure out some way to come up with all the money to do all the necessary capital improvements and then make them as effective as they can possibly be for their age and design. So that's got some advantages. While it certainly addresses all the immediate capital improvement needs, if we could come up with $22.5 million for over the next 10 years, there would be no school reassignments. Everybody would get to walk or get a ride or take the bus to the same elementary school that they did the year before. So that's always nice. We don't like change. But it too comes with a list of disadvantages. Certainly does not address some of the inherent design characteristics of some of the facilities in the campuses, and we know that about Jackson. Some of the most obvious ones are the traffic and safety and parking concerns that exist at Jackson, and a number of the other buildings have design characteristics that we simply can't change with capital improvements by replacing boilers and putting new roofs on and things like that. Even if we were able to come up with $22.5 million and do all of the capital improvements just for the next 10 years, we still have 80% of our square footage 40 years old and older. And that doesn't change, and it gets worse next year, and the year after, and the year after, and the year after. So we can make that one of our pieces as we sit and assess these options. Capital funding models are inadequate, and we know that. And the reality and the viability of coming up with $22.5 million to do capital improvements on inventory of buildings as the age we have is probably not realistic. And it's going to be a really tough sell if we chose to try to entertain that option. And beyond that, capital improvements remain necessary at a number of the other buildings. So at that point, we've only addressed the elementary ones and a couple of others with $22.5 million. Now we do a good job with the others, but they too will continue to decline. And you heard us talk about the high school. Option three, well, we talked about the idea of replacing Jackson. And we went to referendum to attempt to do that. It was in our 25-year plan. When we built the 25-year plan 9, 10, 11 years ago, it made sense. Enrollment curves were a pretty clear indication that a a school in Jackson, and the geographic trends tended to indicate that that was going to be a good move. As with any plan, it has input variables, and you make projections on what those variables are going to be, and sometimes those variables change. And if we don't continually adjust the plan based on what those variables are, we may not make the best choices. And as we review it now, you're gonna hear us talk about another option that talks about the idea that perhaps a school in Jackson is no longer justified. And as we look at new enrollment data, that 25-year plan starts to look a little bit differently. And we can talk about what that is. If we did replace a school in Jackson, it too has advantages and disadvantages. While certainly it takes $6.1 million off of our capital improvement shopping list over the next 5 years and $7.5 million over the next 10 years, it gets a nice new school in Jackson, creates a great optimal learning environment for that facility. We see some energy and operational cost reductions for a single facility on a single campus. We have no redistricting. Everybody gets to go to the same school they were going to before. We all like that. And there's minimal construction disruption because we own another piece of property there, and we don't have to do construction on an occupied site on an occupied campus. So those are the advantages. Disadvantages, well, you got to come up with the money to build a new school. And we've seen what happened when we tried to do that. It only addresses Jackson. So it only takes care of one part of the elementary school inventory. We get no reduction in administrative or operating costs, and we're going to talk a lot more about that before we're done here. And it invests our hard-to-come-by resources at the most remote location in the district. So we can take care of Jackson, and we still have Fair Park and Decorah and some other problems that exist that are right here and where a large population of our students reside. Option 4 is the one that we spent our most amount of time on, and it really is different than anything we've talked about thus far. And there were a number of variations of this as we went about our work, and we talked about the pros and cons of this being more encompassing or less encompassing, and we started to dig into it deeper and deeper, and at the end of the day, this is the option that if we were sitting in our boardrooms and our conference rooms and in front of our whiteboards with our teams, we'd be going, that makes the most sense, if we were doing this purely through a business lens. And what it talks about is constructing one new school with a capacity of roughly 783 students, somewhere at a south side location in West Bend. It also includes a small expansion to Green Tree to increase its capacity. And in lieu of that, we would propose that Jackson be decommissioned and liquidated. In addition, we would liquidate the new building site at Jackson, liquidate Fair Park, liquidate Decorah, and as holds true for this facility and Rolf's, and consolidate all of those activities into a single central campus somewhere on the south side of West Bend. And we talk about the pros and cons of that. And then obviously we would redistribute students accordingly. So what does that do? So with respect to elementary schools, it immediately takes the 3 worst buildings out of our inventory. We no longer own these things. And we get rid of these things, and they become somebody else's problem. They likely get put back on the tax rolls. They get put back into the private sector somehow. So there's some advantages there. It takes the $22.5 million of needed capital improvements that we've been talking about, and it makes them go away. So that's something that we don't have hanging over us any longer. There would clearly be some opportunities for staffing reductions. When we centralize all those activities to a central location, there's going to be an opportunity for some economies of scale and some things we can do to become more efficient at the work we do in a number of disciplines, not only educating elementary students, but in operations and building maintenance and administration. They're all there. It creates not just an old building that is well maintained and improved, but it creates a 21st century learning environment for everybody that is there. And it corrects things that you can't correct at Jackson if you simply change the boiler or put a new roof on or replace the windows. It becomes attractive to family and staff. Suddenly, our entire landscape with respect to elementary education in the district changes, and it has a whole new look and a whole new appeal. Certainly, that's not the only reason we would do this, but it can't be ignored. The beautiful thing about building this thing from scratch is we can right-size it. We can look at exactly what the enrollment trends are, and we can build it to include only the amount of square footage that we need now, and then as you get an opportunity to see a potential design, you can see how that can be expanded to meet enrollment needs if or when that trend should start to go the other way. Disadvantages, well, it too has some disadvantages. There's going to be some potential increase in busing expense if we choose to do this, and we can do it successfully. Obviously, Jackson kids are going to have to be brought a couple miles north into town. School disruption, when we take 3 elementary schools and redistribute all that and more, if you can talk about Green Tree and who knows, maybe even McLean gets impacted, we're going to shake up the snow globe a little bit and see where people land. And nobody enjoys that, especially if you are the parent of elementary school kids. And then obviously there's the initial investment. You still have to pass a referendum, and you still have to get the money. One of the big advantages here that I'm going to let Ed talk about really substantially, however, is when we start to talk about the reduction in maintenance and the reduction in operating costs, we can go a long way, we believe, towards offsetting the payments on principal and interest of debt that would be required to build this. And I think you're going to see the math on that very shortly. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our friends from Zimmerman, and they're going to talk about what this concept potentially looks like.
Good evening. So the first thing we took a look at was enrollment projections, and we took a look at the projection completed by the Applied Population Laboratory out of Madison. As of this year, it was projected to be at 2039. And you can see how it would go down to, in 10 years, 1992. When you take a look at your third Friday count, third Friday of this past September, you're actually at 1895. So your enrollment this year is already lower than what's being projected in 2027, 28. So we took a look and said, how could we address that? And we were looking at the fourth grade, kindergarten through fourth grade. We looked at the current capacities, and we saw that the current capacity is at 2,575. I'm not sure you would ever get those capacities with some of these buildings. But what we took a look at is how could we get closer to what you really need in right size. By eliminating Jackson, Decorah, and Fair Park, expanding Green Tree, increasing enrollment slightly at McLean, and then building the new South Elementary School, we could get to 2018 for a capacity. Now when you turn to the next page, what you'd see is a theoretical plan. It's a theoretical plan, but it's a plan pretty close that actually works very well for the Racine School District. What this plan shows is 6 sections for each grade level. There's also additional classrooms available so that if you wanted to, you could go to 7 sessions per each grade level. The yellow squares are collaboration areas. So again, bringing 21st century education standards where the classrooms can gather together and collaborate as one. And what the plan shows here is you could have kindergarten in one wing, first grade in another wing, second and third in the other, fourth in the top wing, and then some additional classroom space to spread out for other ideas. We have support space, and we have then the cafeteria, the gym. The gymnasium is the same current size that is at the last one that we did at Green Tree. So it's the current size of Green Tree's cafeteria. Then you can also see the district offices and the maintenance garage attached to the building also. The green is all of the admin and support spaces. Reason why we do have some additional classroom spaces available is for the fact that we have not done complete educational programming of the space, and we would probably need to look at some of those spaces, but we have, this plan would easily accommodate the 783 students. On the next page, if you really started to expand, or if we needed to go to a larger school, you can see how this building could very easily expand. You can almost double the size of the number of classrooms. And we would look at, again, adding a new gymnasium, maybe another IMC, another art classroom, various things. But it's very easy, it's adaptable to expand. Even with mechanical systems and security systems, it would be very clean to add on to without a problem. At Green Tree, one of the main things we want to do is not interfere with a lot of the supporting spaces that you have in the center core of the building. So we took a look at needing to add on to about 5 classrooms. And one of those classrooms you can see is an additional art classroom. Again, we would adjust those classrooms and the designations as we move forward. But it's a small addition, and it works out very well with the way it's already been laid out.
This is some budgetary items with relation to what we call the Southside Elementary School, Elementary School land, what it would cost to build district offices, replace Ralph's, maintenance facility, and the potential Green Tree work. Comes up to a total of $28.5 million. Again, the numbers aren't as critical as the formula that we're about to get into, and so whether those numbers are plus or minus 20%, we'll account for those as we move forward, but just understanding the formula and the methodology is probably the critical piece right now. Ed?
Thanks, Craig. Our subcommittee's task was specifically to gather and process school district information in regard to daily operations and identify potential efficiency opportunities. So this first slide is basically a summary of the subcommittee's findings in regard to operational considerations. And again, I'd like to reiterate what Owen said earlier, that the group is very confident that the numbers that we have input into the next several slides are extremely conservative. Our research has shown that annual staffing efficiencies of $600,000 to $750,000 or more are possible if the Southside Elementary Campus concept were constructed just through staff savings in administration, teachers, and maintenance personnel. And with not included in these numbers, they do not reflect certain additional savings that would be realized through food service, custodial services, grounds maintenance, snow removal, and a whole list of other daily operational efficiencies that would be present in the consolidating of 6 facilities and 6 physical locations down into 1. Energy efficiency. We found that the school district would save between $100,000 and $200,000 a year adopting this concept purely by taking 6 of our least efficient buildings currently operating at a range of 87 cents a square foot to $1.35 a square foot, and replacing those 6 facilities with substantially fewer square footage at a much more efficient cost per square foot, likely at 70 cents a square foot or less. We talked earlier about LED lighting, and if the board were so to choose, swapping out the balance of the remaining buildings in the district, swapping out all those T8 and T12 fixtures in the remaining schools with LED fixtures would generate another $175,000 to $300,000 plus annually. We also got into sourcing opportunities. We researched and identified various sourcing opportunities, savings in building maintenance, custodial services, ground maintenance, and IT, and those savings could range anywhere from 1.2 to almost 1.4 million a year. And our group found that the more time that is invested in researching the variety of sourcing opportunities within the school district, that the larger return would be. And I know firsthand that this can be a very challenging part of the process, but feel it's very necessary. So if we combine that list of operational considerations, it gives us a range of between $2.075 million and $2.64 million a year. The next slide really breaks down the financial investment of it all. The collective costs of the Green Tree expansion, construction of the South Side Elementary campus, including the new district offices, maintenance building, and land acquisition, that total is $28.5 million. The collective costs, as Owen had presented, of the high school improvements, including the safety, lighting and HVAC upgrades, shower and locker room upgrades, library and study hall upgrades, central office consolidation, classroom additions and upgrades, and the student commons and courtyard area, that combined total is $21.3 million. Adding them together, we're just south of $50 million. Now, if we take that $49.8 million number and we amortize that investment at 3% over 20 years, we'd have $3.325 million a year in principal and interest payments. Now, again, we're using a 20% range here. The range on that math would be between 2.6 and just south of $4 million a year. Now, from that number, if we deduct our range of operational considerations from the range of new principal and interest, that net result in the best case would be $20,000 a year in new principal and interest, up to $1.9 million in new principal and interest per year. On the next slide, we break down the midterm financial view, basically looking out at this over the next 10 years. Again, we have new construction costs of just about $50 million. As Randy had mentioned earlier, we have a known cost avoidance of $22.5 million. And again, as Randy had mentioned, you know, these dollars are maintenance items per Dave Ross, and thanks again, Dave, for all your hard work on this, on the 6 buildings we had mentioned. You know, this, Dave will confirm and verify, this list doesn't include anything glamorous on it. We're talking new rooftops, HVAC systems, you know, repaving parking lots and playgrounds. It's basic needs to keep our learning environments dry and climate controlled. Nothing fancy about it at all. I should also note again that this number, this $22.5 million, is currently unfunded or underfunded. The difference between those two numbers, the new construction and the cost avoidance, is $27.3 million. Now, from this number, we deducted the proceeds of the land and building sales for the 7 properties, and we input a number of $5.175 million. Here I'd like to note that our subcommittee did work with a local commercial real estate broker and valued all 7 of those properties, including the vacant land in Jackson. And the broker gave us a current range of between 7 and 8.4 million value today for those properties. We took 25% less than the low part of that range, and we input that into our formula. So putting that number into our equation, we end up with a total new debt of $22.216 million. And if we amortize that at 3% over 20 years, we end up with just about $1.5 million in new principal and interest. Now here's where the hard stuff comes in. Now we go to work on deducting the operational efficiencies. And using the ranges that we provided, you would end up with a surplus of between $587,000 a year and $1.15 million a year. And, you know, looking forward, we found that generating a surplus and making some tough decisions is really the key to solving the current and continuous underfunding of building maintenance and capital projects. And the final slide, it's just a summary. Again, retire and sell Jackson, the Jackson land, Decorah, Fair Park, the district office, the Rolfs building, the maintenance building, maximize operational efficiencies, realizing that the entire board has some challenging work ahead. building the addition of Green Tree, completing the renovations at the high school, and constructing the Southside Elementary School and campus. And again, commit to increased communication, implement a rolling 25-year plan that is updated regularly, and plan to adequately maintain the district assets. With that, I'll turn it over to Craig for conclusion.
Thank you, guys. As I touched on, half an hour ago or so, we think the formula is the key. Those numbers, of course, aren't exactly accurate. Don brought up in a prior discussion that it doesn't exactly work that way. Is that sort of how you presented it? That was very fair. It's not as black and white, but we think the formula and the idea is the key to the findings, and you guys can figure out how to make it work internally. So no doubt some challenges lie ahead that the board and staff will be analyzing. We understand that at first glance, some of these may be unsettling. They may be unsettling for some of the constituents, but we believe these are the best mid and long-term options available for the district. We don't think it can be business as usual. We've got to get bold to solve the new challenges that exist in today's world. Regarding the report, some members of the press are here. We've distributed this to the daily news, and we'll probably distribute it to some regional folks as well. We would love it if you posted this on the district website, if that's a possibility. We've got some digital copies if anybody wants that. We might have a copy or two if someone wants to put this in a time capsule and see what happens 50 years from now, it'd be fine. And really a final thank you. Thank you for allowing us to do the work. I know you guys took a chance on us, not really sure what this group was going to be all about. We understand that you rolled the dice, and thank you. Thank you truly for your commitment to the district and to our kids, and for volunteering to do a tough job. We're all volunteers in one way or another, one way, shape, or form, and we appreciate the work that you're doing, and thank you for the support of the findings. Like we've agreed that after you've had time to digest the information, we'd be happy to come back and answer some specific questions. We can hit a couple of high ones tonight if you happen to have any, but again, it probably takes some internal discussion, some digesting of the information. We'd be happy to come back and give you some more information behind the scenes as to how we arrived at some of our solutions. That's it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. As I bumped into a few of you around town over the past few months, I would always ask, how's it going? And you always remained pretty tight-lipped. But one thing was for certain was this took a lot of your time. And I really appreciate that. And I think on behalf of all of us, we understand that you put a lot of time and effort into this. I think you are right that this is going to make things tough for this board going forward, and there's a lot to think about here. We're not making any decisions, obviously, tonight or really any time quickly, because there's a lot that will go into the future of our facilities in the district. So, but for myself, I want to say thank you to all of you, and to the gang sitting over there who was a part of this as well. Thank you very much. And I guess I do want to throw a little disclaimer out there again to make sure everyone knows that this was an independent task force. It was your idea to do this, and this was the culmination of that, was presenting your ideas and thoughts and research to us, and I really do appreciate that.
Thanks, Joel.
Quick question. This is probably for Zimmerman more than anyone, or anyone who has the answer, please feel free to throw it out. When you referenced the school, I'm sorry, that was a larger school. Where was that exactly? Racine. And do you have other examples of schools that have maybe closed some schools and kind of built, lack of a better word, I'll call it a super school? Others? Mr. Mayor, did you have another one, or?
No, I was just looking to see if you needed the mic so folks at home can hear.
Okay. So Racine, New Berlin, and Beaver Dam, for sure, that we could certainly connect with and see what they're doing. Thank you.
Being one of the two newest members to the board, I've had people ask me over the last couple months, how's your time on the board going? And I said, so far so good. The tough work starts on October 15th, and, but that's tomorrow. We'll let tomorrow take care of itself. I want to thank you guys for the time you've put into this. I mean, I consider this to be a blue ribbon panel. The knowledge that you guys have on designing, constructing, maintaining buildings is immense, and there's some great value in here. But one person I specifically want to call out and thank for participating is Owen. Obviously, you had some strong opinions back in April regarding the proposal that was in front of us. And I'm looking at your blog post from yesterday, and thank you for putting pants on and coming out of your basement to be here. But for the citizens in the room and for anybody watching in TV land, we want you all to have opinions. But we want you to have opinions coming from an informed position. And Owen makes the comment in his blog that he found it enlightening and enriching. And we know the beauty of social media and how it can propagate opinions, misinformation, and so forth. And we encourage people to get involved, to learn, to see what's going on. And I think the learning for us is one of the points that you raised of improving communication. Maybe we've not wanted to air our dirty laundry about some of the facilities challenges that we have in the community. We can't do that because you can't fund what you don't understand, and you don't understand what we don't share. So I think that's on us going forward. This has been a great experience to hear your perspective, and again, appreciate your time, so thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
I think we will have plenty of questions. I wrote down several, and just for example, and I don't need an answer, but like LED in the high school. Are you talking LED in the entire building, or just hallways, just the gym, whatever? Again, don't need to answer that tonight, but I know we're going to have several questions like that of where you came up with maybe some of the numbers as it relates to some of the projects, that sort of thing. I'll reach out maybe through Don to Craig, whatever, we'll figure that out. But I don't think we necessarily need to go through stuff like that tonight, if that's okay with everybody.
If I could make just one quick comment, I appreciate everything you've done. I wish you would have went to all of the elementary schools, because you're making maybe an assumption that McLean is really in great shape. And McLean, even though it had some things done a few years ago, that is an 80-year-old building. And if I visit with the teachers of McLean, they're going to say, boy, that is in much of need as any in the whole district, okay? And I'm not saying it is or isn't. Or if you go to Green Tree, we did a great addition to part of Green Tree, but we also have 75% of Green Tree that's 50 years old as well. And so obviously these are difficult questions for a later date and discussions, but one of the things that I wish in retrospect is that to look at 3 of the elementaries and not 5, even though the other 2 have had some structural things done to them, it really paints a picture that maybe McLean is good to go with no major renovations necessary. Or Green Tree, put a new addition on, the rest of Green Tree is in pretty good shape. And those are questions that you guys are going to have to ask as we go forward, and lots of exciting times in the future. Thank you.
Don, I can answer that real quick. It was intentional, and Dave can correct me and he can fill you guys in, but I think between McLean and Green Tree, they received like a C+ and a B or something grade. Might have been a B- and a C+. The other 3 were Ds and Fs, so we attacked the Ds and Fs thinking that this is a 10-year look. It's not that we didn't have the energy or stamina for it. We intentionally picked the Ds and Fs and grabbed those.
So if you do have the energy and stamina, maybe you would look at those schools still for us if we ask nicely.
Maybe. I said these guys said yes once.
Oh, come on, guys.
The findings that we shared with you tonight are really conceptual. We didn't have the time or resources to really dig into every detail of this. I wouldn't be surprised if, as a board, what you walk away with here is a springboard to let's rejuvenate that 25-year plan, and let's insert those findings into that plan and really flesh them out and build them into what we think is the right option. And maybe it does include, maybe there are discussions about McLean. Maybe there are more discussions about Green Tree. But this should serve as a springboard to get those discussions going.
Absolutely.
I'll just echo that. Thank you for being bold and innovative, and I know your time is valuable. I know this will spark conversation among the community, because we do have to get community support no matter what we decide here, and this panel has sparked that further discussion that we're going to have to solve the problem. So I look forward to the questions and the answers and the solutions coming up.
Yeah, I also appreciate that you've done this, because I'm glad that it's not just complaining about what's wrong, but providing a solution for what could be solved. And also, I'd like to point out that the price point's pretty similar to what the referendum was, but you're giving us a lot more for the money. And I know Dave probably appreciates the fact that he has been dealing with a below adequate maintenance budget for a very long time, and we've been worried about that, and it just feels like it's been landing on deaf ears for a long time. So I'm really grateful that you've shined a light on the issues that we have, and have a solution that will get a lot of people talking about it. So thank you.
I think maybe as a board, just to think about what would be a good venue or opportunity to start getting feedback from the community. I mean, I think, you know, if this story's in the paper tomorrow, we might start getting flooded with phone calls or emails, but do we start having listening sessions? Do we start having forums like this where the public is invited to participate in discussions? Just something to think about, because I don't necessarily want to start responding to 6,000 emails over my opinion on this topic, because it's all of our opinions and it's a community opinion on this topic. And so I think it's going to spark a lot of discussion in the community, and I think as a board we better figure out a way to be able to listen to all the feedback that I anticipate we're going to get.
And Joel, just to piggyback on that, for everybody listening out there, there is no foregone conclusion by this board. We've not talked about what might be delivered today. We waited to see this, and it is truly information gathering now. So there's no decision that's been made that's waiting in some back room somewhere.
So Joel, on the next board meeting in October, 28th, I believe it is, or our next board meeting, I have this topic on the agenda, not as a discussion topic, but for you to come up with a date for us to look at another committee of the whole type meeting. I don't think we can do it justice at our meeting in October. It's still too early, but I do believe that we need to then set the ground. When do we want to meet? What kind of process? And so that's what I have on the agenda for our next board meeting.
Great. If we keep talking to 7:15, you think everyone will stay in the room, or? Just kidding. Any more comments, questions? Thank you very much, and we'll stand adjourned.